Jack's first memory was darkness, a place without sound, without sight, only a smothering weight pressing down on his mind. He felt cold, damp metal against his wrists, rough leather strapping him down. A rhythmic beeping filled his ears, steady and sharp, dragging him from that endless void. He opened his eyes, blinking against the harsh fluorescent light overhead, and saw a man standing in front of him, adjusting a microscope. The man's lab coat was stained with something dark, and his hands shook slightly as he worked. "Welcome back," the man said, his voice trembling but relieved. "It worked." Jack struggled to understand. His mouth felt dry, his throat raw. Where am I?" The man stepped closer, revealing a thin, weary face. "You're in the last research lab left in this city. I'm Dr. Hammond." He gestured to a small vial of clear liquid on the table beside him. "You were part of the infected, a zombie. That vial is the cure. And you're the proof that it works." Jack's mind reeled. He didn't remember anything, not his name, not his life, just fragments of faces and places he couldn't piece together. The word zombie echoed in his mind, a horrifying realization settling like lead in his stomach. How long?" "Almost 2 years," Dr. Hammond said. "You were one of the early infected. You've been gone, Jack." Jack felt a sharp pang, his own name feeling foreign, distant. Before he could process it, an alarm blared throughout the lab, loud and frantic. Hammond's face twisted with dread as he glanced at a monitor on the wall, which showed hordes of zombies pressing against the facility's barricades. "They're here," Dr. Hammond muttered. He grabbed the vial and turned to Jack, urgency flashing in his eyes. "Listen to me. I don't know if we're getting out of this alive. This is the only dose I could make. You need to get it to Sector 9's research lab. They have the equipment to mass produce it." He pressed the vial into Jack's bound hands. Jack's heart pounded and he tried to free himself, but the metal bit into his wrists, holding him fast. "Let me out! I can help!" "I can't," Dr. Hammond replied, eyes pained. "It was a precaution. I didn't know if you'd be safe." The siren grew louder. Through the lab's glass door, they saw a wave of infected crash through the last security checkpoint, spilling into the hallway like a flood. Dr. Hammond grabbed a scalpel, turning to face them. "Get that cure out, Jack. Do whatever you have to." The infected poured through the door, clawing, snarling. Dr. Hammond managed to slice into one of them before they overwhelmed him. Jack saw them tear into him, saw his face contort in pain, heard his scream abruptly silenced. His fingers clutched the vial, slick with sweat, as desperation took hold. Jack knew he had to get out. He had to keep that vial safe. He glanced at his hands, bound and bloody from the doctor's precautions. With a grim resolve, he pressed his wrist against the edge of the metal table, grinding his skin against it until he felt flesh tear. Pain ripped through him as he pulled, the skin degloving from his hand, leaving raw, exposed muscle and bone beneath. He was free. Ignoring the searing pain, Jack stumbled to his feet and shoved his way through the door. The infected were still tearing into Dr. Hammond, oblivious to him. Heart hammering, he ran down the hall, gripping the vial tightly with his mangled hand. Outside, the city was in ruins. Buildings were charred skeletons, streets littered with debris and bodies. The stench was overpowering, death and rot mingling in the air. Jack pressed forward, his entire body aching, driven by the knowledge that he held humanity's only chance for survival. As he made his way through the abandoned city, memories started surfacing in fragments. A woman's face, kind eyes, a gentle smile, a child laughing. His heart ached with a pain deeper than his injuries, the realization settling in that those memories were remnants of a life he would never have back. He crept through alleys, dodging groups of infected as they staggered and shuffled through the streets. Each step felt like a battle, his vision blurring from pain and exhaustion. At one point, he stumbled into an abandoned bus, crouching behind a seat as a group of zombies shambled past outside. His hand throbbed, and he dared a glance at it, the exposed flesh raw and bleeding. He pushed on, gritting his teeth, one thought repeating in his mind. Get to Sector 9. This has to mean something. Finally, he saw it. A squat, fortified building at the edge of the city, surrounded by layers of barbed wire and concrete barriers. It was Sector 9. Relief flooded him, nearly knocking him to his knees. But a swarm of infected was gathered around the entrance, blocking his way. Jack waited, hidden behind a wrecked car, until a group of soldiers on patrol noticed the horde and began firing. In the chaos, Jack made a break for it, dashing toward the entrance. His wounded hand screamed in agony, but he clung to the vial, praying he wouldn't drop it. He reached the gate, pounding on it with his good hand. A guard spotted him, his gun raised, eyes narrowing with suspicion. Jack held up the vial, his voice a hoarse whisper. I have the cure." The guard's eyes widened, and he shouted for the others to open the gate. They dragged Jack inside, barely conscious, and rushed him to the lab. White-coated scientists surrounded him, taking the vial with reverence, as if it were sacred. Lying on a stretcher, Jack watched as the scientists began working, their faces lighting up with hope as they examined the formula. Exhaustion overtook him, his vision fading, but he felt a strange peace. He had no idea what lay ahead for him, whether he would heal or simply fade away. But he knew one thing: the vial, that little spark of hope, was in the right hands. As his eyes closed, Jack felt a calm he hadn't known since waking up in that lab. For the first time, he didn't feel like a monster. He felt human.